This interview is with Lovell S. Jarvis, Emeritus Professor of Agricultural and Resource Economics. Known by his nickname, Two, he was born in Kansas and received his B.S. in Economics Summa Cum Laude from the University of Kansas in 1964. He then obtained his Ph.D. in Economics from MIT in 1969. Two started his academic career in 1969 as an assistant professor of economics at UC Berkeley. On sabbatical in 1972 to 73, he was program advisor in economics for the Ford Foundation, Santiago, Chile. He returned to UC Berkeley until 1984, when he joined the UC Davis Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics. During his tenure, Two held administrative positions including faculty director of the UCD Global Center for Latin America and the Caribbean from 2018 to 2020, and faculty director of the Life Sciences Innovation Center, UCD Chile Center, from 2019 to 2021 on recall. He was active in the UCD Academic Senate, chairing the Committee on Public Service and Committee on Research. He also served on the Systemwide University Committee on Research, the Academic Council Special Committee on the National Laboratories, as well as the Steering Committee Industry University Cooperative Research Program. Two's research focuses on the economics of livestock, animal health management, agricultural research and technical change, the International Coffee Agreement, food and nutrition policy, and Chilean agricultural development, including land reform and agricultural modernization. He has received grants and awards from the National Science Foundation, U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Fulbright Foundation, and the Social Sciences Research Council. Two is interviewed by his longtime friend and colleague, Professor Emeritus of Plant Pathology, Jim McDonald.
Well, hello, Two.
Hi, Jim.
Good to see you again.
Likewise.
It's been a while.
Yes.
Old retired people.
Yeah. Nice to be on your table.
So I want to talk a little bit about your early background before we get into the more current stuff. But where did you grow up? Tell people where you grew up.
Okay. Well, I was born in 1941 in Halstead, Kansas. And
on a map of Kansas, where is that?
That's sort of pretty much in the center.
Oh, okay.
But my mother moved very soon to Winfield, Kansas, a town of about 10,000 in south central Kansas. And I stayed there until the time I went away to university. And I was thinking when I started trying to prepare for this interview that, number one, it was incredibly enjoyable, to me, to go back and reflect. It was satisfying in the sense that I felt after I'd finished, okay, I'd done some things that I hoped were useful. It was incredibly humbling as I sort of compared what I thought I had done to what I knew a lot of colleagues had done. In some senses, because of all the time we spent in the dean's office reviewing personnel files, you see some pretty exceptional things. I remember it came upon me one day to sign one of Bruce Hammock's files, and in that 3-year period of time, as I remember, he had 60 publications. He had brought 2 firms to market.
There's an old saying, don't measure yourself by someone else's ruler.
I said, well, that was right. And I remember when I was doing my Ph.D. my last semester, or first semester of my last year, I was a teaching assistant for Bob Solow. And Solow got his Nobel Prize in '56. He was a wonderful person as well as an exceptional economist. And we were doing something one day, and I said to him, gosh, you did that quickly. And he turned and he said to me, anything I can do in a month, Paul Samuelson can do in a week, and Ken Arrow can do in a day. And I remember thinking, Lord, even at the level of Nobel Prize winners, there's some sort of pecking order in the minds of people. I said, I'm not ever going to be a Nobel Prize winner. I said, the only thing you can do is do what you do as well as you can do it, and try to be happy. And so that basically, I'm going to talk, I really look back on what I thought was a very lucky, fortunate overall life.
But as you started school, What were the things that interested you, and how did you get interested in economics?
Well, so my biological father, as you know, died when I was 9 months old. He was a pilot in World War II. And my mother then married again when I was 6. And my second father really became my father. I was adopted by him eventually, and played just an extraordinarily important role in my life. I love him absolutely dearly. So when I was in high school, I took 2 classes in mechanical engineering and one of architectural drawing and one of architectural drawing. I thought I wanted to be an architect. But as I thought more about it, my dad had a really nice business, a chain of auto supply stores, and he wanted me to come back and go into business with him, and I thought I was going to do that. So when I went to the University of Kansas, which was really the only place I ever imagined being an undergraduate, I couldn't go into business school because they had a regulation that you couldn't go to business school for 2 years.
Why?
Because business wasn't considered to be intellectually challenging. And so I took a lot of classes in humanities and social sciences, you know, basic requisites, etc., in science, etc. And then decided, all right, during that period of time, I'd take some economics. And I just found out that I was good at economics and I enjoyed it. So I kept majoring. And when I was junior, I was sitting to see my advisor, and one of my professors came out of his office. He was the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and we were just talking a while, and he said, you know, you should get a Ph.D.
You were still an undergraduate at that point.
I was a junior at that time, and nobody had ever suggested anything like that to me, and I was surprised. I was happy. I was intrigued. And at that time, I had been in love with a woman. We had broken up, and so I let it sort of sit for a while. And everybody in those days got involved in student activities. And I did, and there was a new student activity called University People to People that looked connecting students to international affairs, international peoples. And I became the president of that organization. And then shortly after was asked if I wanted to go to Europe to start a student exchange program where we would bring students over from, at that time we had like 8 campus programs in the Midwest. And I decided, well, yeah, I mean, I could go. It sounded like an enormous amount of fun. And my girlfriend, who was a year younger, maybe she'd still be around, we'd try again. So I went off to Europe for a year and a half and ran a student organization. It was one of the really, truly wonderful experiences of my life. Lived in Brussels, but traveled everywhere in Europe. We arranged free homestays for our students from 3 days to a week in 20 different European cities. The students simply had to sign up and tell us where they wanted to go, and we worked with international student organizations or national student organizations who really did the legwork. It was a fantastic thing. Anyway, so that was my moving out from a small Kansas town to know something about the world. I came back. I was a co-director, and he became my best friend, my other director. He was a year older. He went straight off to Harvard Law School. I went back, finished. Relationship with my girlfriend never worked out.
She forgot you while you were gone.
Well, no, we saw each other a fair amount, but we never established a relationship. It's one of the great mysteries in some senses of my life as to whatever took place there. Sort of, but you know, everybody has these. So I applied to a lot of graduate school. I decided I'd go to graduate school, get a Ph.D. in economics. Was very naive, really didn't know why the hell I was doing it other than somebody had suggested I should get a Ph.D. And got accepted to MIT, went off to MIT, found it to be the most wonderful environment. I was very fearful going there, that it was going to be all test tubes and sterile. And
but you had never really had any undergraduate classes in economics or anything?
Oh no, I majored in economics.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so and that's why the economics professor came to me.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I got an award for the best economic student and so on and so forth. No, I mean, I wouldn't have gotten an MIT if I didn't have a good background. It was the best graduate program, I think, in the world, and probably still is. Just wonderful faculty, wonderful classmates. There were 5 of the guys not in my class that have gotten Nobel Prizes. I mean, it was a place really exciting to be. And while I was there, I was in macro theory, what we called then fiscal policy and monetary policy, international trade. And I went to Argentina to write a dissertation on inflation, the effects of inflation on investments. And there wasn't any data, lots of inflation, but no data. And a friend, we went to Symphony, and he said, I wanted to keep working on Argentina. I'd spent all this time learning about the society and the economy and learn language and one thing and another, which showed how naive I was. I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was fishing for something to work on. And he said, well, work on agriculture. It's really important to Argentina. So I went back, and my thesis advisor, who was a brilliant young monetary theorist from Argentina, died within 2 months of my being back. So I had to look for a new thesis advisor, and there was a guy named Frank Fisher, who was an absolutely brilliant economist, and had done some work, had some students who had done some work in this area. He was an econometrician. And I remember being fearful. I stuck my head around the edge of his office.
Fearful of what?
He was a very stern sort of, or seemingly, I'm sorry, he had a heart of gold, but I didn't realize that at this time. He was sort of gruff. And after I had been talking to him for 20 seconds, he said, what do you want? Want me to be your thesis advisor? Okay.
Really gave it a lot of fun, huh?
I don't know how he intuited it, etc., but yeah, and so I went away happy. And later presented something at a seminar in which I said something about cattle and slaughter. He said, nonsense! He shouted out from the back of the room. The room was full of graduate students and a few faculty. Yeah, did great things for my ego. So I went into his office, he put an equation on the board, differentiated it, and said, see, that doesn't happen. So I disappeared for several weeks and worked on the same equation until I could adapt it to something that, when I differentiated it, got the result that seemingly happened in Argentina. And it was the beginning of really my professional research career, because, I mean, I owe him tremendously just the stimulation of putting me onto an equation.
So you were just trying to prove him wrong.
No, I was trying to prove
that you were right.
What somebody had told me was happening in Argentina. And so it seemed to me that the empirical result was there. So how did you represent it, mathematically? So I ended up writing a dissertation on cattle as capital goods and producers as portfolio managers, where I had these little mathematical models of cattle, etc. And then did empirical stuff, had to invest a lot of data, all this stuff. But it was crucial in 2 senses. One, it changed me from macroeconomics to microeconomics. It changed me, it allowed me to do my dissertation in Argentina, so I became a development economist, which is defined as somebody studying any topic in any developing country. And he really liked it. I hardly ever talked to him, but I would bring him stuff and then get an approval, say, yeah, that thing sounds great. And I remember when I was, these are my happiest moments, when we went searching for academic jobs. We went to the American Economics Association meetings, which always happened around New Year's, where you interviewed universities. And I asked him, I said, Frank, what should I shoot for? Who can I interview? He said, you can go any place you want to go. what took a while for that to sink in.
Yeah.
Other than just sheer joy that he obviously thought what I had done was good. So I interviewed. I got an interview at Berkeley. I went out for an interview. I interviewed. I got the job. So I go off to Berkeley, happy as can be to be coming to California. And liked it. I was a little unclear what the hell I was supposed to do. And about very shortly after I'm there, I find that somebody that I had helped at University of Chicago with giving him my dissertation and the like, basically plagiarized my dissertation.
Huh?
All of the equations, the empirical work, etc., and I'd had no idea what to do. I should have called Frank. Frank would have told me what to do. Frank would have helped me. But I was sort of naive, and I didn't. So I, worked on things, but I was a little slow getting off the mark. And Berkeley Econ gave all faculty members a sabbatical, a full-year sabbatical after 3 years, which is just unheard of. And I was going back to Argentina to do work on technological transfer in agriculture when I got a call from the Ford Foundation asking if I wanted to be the program advisor for the Southern Cone in their Santiago office for 18 months. Chile was in the midst of, Allende had just been elected. It seemed like this was a society that was moving towards some sort of positive reforms, etc. Exciting. And I'd been in Chile briefly a couple times and liked it. So my wife and I, off we went with a young daughter. And that was another major event because that whole process became highly politically polarized. I mean, it was huge demonstration.
What process?
The political process, because Allende was a Marxist and increasingly used what I would call extra-legal affairs.
Oh.
Land reform was in process. That had been legislated, but he began to take over large industries, banks, financial sector. I was very supportive of Allende for about 9 months, and after 9 months I said, this is going nowhere. This is going to end up like Spain, a civil war, really horrendous consequences. Not that I had anything to say about it. But then the military coup came in September 11, 1973. I got there in July of 72, beginning of July. So for 18 months. And in the Ford Foundation, we had, there was complete and total censorship after the coup. Nobody knew anything. In fact, there was an abortive coup in June. I was in a car with a number of friends about to cross the main street, the main avenue downtown, headed to our office. And suddenly there are bullets ricocheting off the building just to my right, coming from down the street. So everybody backed up. Needless to say, we went home, but that coup failed. But another coup took place on September 13th. In the first 2 weeks after the coup, we had calls from wives of 2 Bolivian students that the Ford Foundation had given fellowships to study at Chilean graduate institutions. Police or soldiers had come in the night, taken away the men, called the women the next day and told them where to pick up the bodies. So we knew there was some, even though there was censorship and we knew in the foundation a lot of stuff was going on. Then an American by the name of Ed Horman came looking for his son, came to the foundation, having been told that the foundation had contacts from left to right, and maybe somebody would know something about his son. None of us did. But that night, talking to a Canadian friend who was the chargé d'affaires of the Canadian embassy at the time, the ambassador was out, he said, gosh, I think an American military, a Chilean military officer told me that an American by that name had been executed in the National Stadium. I said, well, obviously neither the Chileans nor the Americans are telling the father. Would you confirm that and let me tell him? He did, gave me information. I called the father, told him. He came in the office. I told him a long story. He went back to the consulate, confirmed with fingerprints by 8 o'clock the next day. That led to all sorts of stuff. I never told anybody until years later, called my Canadian friend, who by that time had left the Canadian diplomatic service, and said, yeah, you can tell them and I'll happen. So he then told a lot of stuff that I didn't know at the time about how he had gotten the information, etc. And that led to a book and then a movie starring Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek called Missing.
Ah.
But as a result of the whole thing, all the research projects in Chile I had went up in smoke. My research collaborators, one of them was, imprisoned and
Well, that's a heck of a way to end a research activity.
It really was. And my wife, I discovered maybe quite some months before we returned, was having an affair with a Chilean neighbor. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was, naive, didn't have any close friends. I thought when we got back, we'd go to therapy and work it out.
Work it out.
It didn't. But I found therapy very useful for me, so I continued for a while. And I quit doing research. I just wasn't interested. I was at Berkeley. And when my time came up, my chair came to say, prepare your dossier, and I said, I'm not publishing anything. I don't think there's a way that you could keep me. I said, I'm just going to resign. He didn't dispute my thing, but he said, would you like to stay on as a lecturer? I said, I'd love to. And he said, well, if you start publishing again, we'll try to take you back. Which I thought was one of the nicest things.
That's very generous.
Anyway, I mean, at least there was respect for, even though I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. Well, as I think as it turned out, I don't think research was my strong point. I think I did some very good research, but I'm not as fast at doing research as a lot of other people that I have known. But whatever, I stayed there. The dean gave me dispensation to supervise theses, etc., which I did. And I started consulting for the World Bank. That was the next stage of my professional career. I started publishing again, but I also did 25 ex post project evaluations where the projects or a series of projects had ended, and you went to the bank and you interviewed all the people that had been involved, you looked at all the records, you went to the country, you interviewed whoever it was. Most of mine were in agriculture. So you talked to farmers, you talked to ministers of economy, etc. It was all confidential, so I couldn't publish anything, although I did one on Uruguay. And I asked for special time because it was really relevant to what I had done in my thesis. And my thesis really was a seminal document. I mean, it changed the way everybody looked at livestock economics. And so when I wrote the thing on Uruguay, there was an executive director in the bank who happened to be from Uruguay who read it, loved it, sent it to the Minister of Economics in Uruguay, and I got hired as an advisor to the Minister of Uruguay. I spent 2 years working on that. So I think, then I was there, a position opened up at Davis in Ag Econ related to IAD, International Agriculture Development. And it had a strange description. I don't even remember what it was, but I remember I didn't like it, I didn't apply. But the next year it came back, it was position in Ag Econ, which was a straight position in Ag Econ with some request to do something in IAD, and I applied and got it. I think I had probably more empirical experience working on agricultural economics between the thesis and all the work that I had done for the World Bank than most people. Economic development, particularly agricultural economic development, was a pretty new thing in those days. We didn't have much idea, particularly in the 60s, about the theory of economic development, and there's very little empirical work because there was very little data. So I was one of a relatively few people who had done empirical work, and let alone who had done all the stuff with the bank for a long period of time. I learned a tremendous amount in the bank mainly about the importance of non-economic factors. All the stuff of looking at these projects, why they succeeded or failed, looking at technological design, I mean, what they thought that they were planning to do, and then how politics, both politics in the bank, politics in the country, institutional politics, anthropology, etc. So I come to Davis. This is long. Now we're at Davis, and at Davis I had a very rich career. But
what classes did you teach?
I taught classes in economic development. We had a graduate sequence, and I taught the first two, sort of alternated on those classes. John Antle at that time was a colleague. He later left the department, but an absolutely marvelous economist. And I taught in IAD, International Agricultural Development. It had 4 core courses. It was it was a graduate group.
Yeah, that's right.
And for people that don't know graduate groups, I think, is an invention at Davis that is sort of unique and quite remarkably useful. It's where you take faculty from multiple departments and let them offer a master's program or a Ph.D. And it really unified the campus in unusual ways by bringing faculty across departments to work together. And when NSF and others became much more interdisciplinary, it gave Davis a real leg up on applying for those sorts of grants. The IAD students were wonderful, but really difficult to teach. They were
How so?
They were skeptical of everything. And I remember Steve Brush, a colleague in anthropology, and I used to
remember
talk
him.
about it. Steve was a wonderful anthropologist. And he and I in general, I took a lot of pride in my teaching. And I was always one of the higher ranked teachers in terms of student evaluations. But I would just get drilled by IAD students, as happened to Steve. And it was because, on the one hand, those students were very antithetical to economics. It suggested capitalism to them. And I was just trying to teach them, say, hey, economics is a tool. You got lots of problems. Economics is an important issue, like it or not. Let's talk about how it can be useful to get insights into the problems that you want to solve. And I had good relationships with the students. I liked them enormously as a group and individually. I do remember that experience rather painfully sometimes.
So how many graduate students have you supervised over the years?
I looked at it, I think something like 25 PhD students all total. But that includes that includes co-chairs and being outside members. If I look at chairs, probably maybe that's at Davis. So I think I had maybe 10 PhD students at Davis. And others then where I was on the committee as an outside member. I've had a number from Chile. I'm really proud that 2 of my PhD students have become chancellors or rectors of the University of Chile. One has twice been Minister of Economics. So I've got one student who was a fellow of the American Agricultural Economics Association.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a number that have certainly exceeded me.
Mm-hmm. So looking back, what were some of your most interesting or challenging research projects that you engaged in?
The first was my thesis. That's really where I learned to do research, and it was obviously successful. And I remember lots of individual moments when I suddenly got some sort of insight into something. It was like a light going on that was just, I'm sure that's what got me into doing research. I just loved it. The second, I started doing research in Chile on small farmers and ended up with doing a lot of work on land reform. And in retirement, it's really...
Was that with the Blum Center?
No. This was something separate. I'll talk about the Blum Center, but this was just when I was still at Berkeley. And on a World Bank trip, I'm in a consulting. I had a job in Colombia and then in Brazil, and afterwards I took off some time and I visited friends in Uruguay and Argentina and then in Chile. And I had a really close Chilean friend who I had given a fellowship to. He decided to use it at Berkeley. He didn't have to. And his wife had taken care of my oldest daughter, because I would go pick her up, and when she was out of kindergarten. And I just went back to see him. I hadn't seen him in a long time. And they had a dinner for me with sort of a buffet dinner, so there were quite a number of economists. There were probably 10, 12 at least who came, who had been friends from the time that I was there. And about 11:30, I looked up and there was a very attractive woman that I had never met. And I asked one of my friends, "Who is that?" He said, I said, "Is that somebody's wife?" He said, "No, that's Teddy's niece." And I made a beeline to start talking to her. And we talked till 2:30 in the morning, and I called her at 7:30 the next morning and said, "I'm leaving tonight on the plane, but could we do something today?" And she said, "I got class in the morning, but I could be ready at 1. And we went for a hike and talked. And she became my wife. And sort of a very long-term connection to Chile. So I twice went back to Chile. I went back at Christmas time to see her. She came up and spent a month in February. I went down for 6 months, and she came up. I went back down for 6 months. We got married, and each time I was down there, I was doing research. I had some research project. And the second one, funded by the World Bank, was to look at small farmers. And I started looking at land reform beneficiaries in particular, and got interested in the whole land reform process, from politics, etc. And then its sort of long-term impact. What impact did land reform actually have?
Mm-hmm.
And there are big debates in Chile about the causes of the fruit boom, which started in the mid-1970s.
The fruit bloom or boom?
Fruit boom.
Boom, yeah.
Which basically was a development of the fruit sector, which is by far the most profitable production.
In the wintertime, all of our stuff comes from Chile.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And Chilean agriculture had never been profitable before, except for a brief period of wheat production, 1840, 1880, something like that. And yet it's an absolutely crucial thing culturally and politically, because from the time of the Spanish conquest, large land grants given out led to basically what you might call sort of a monopoly on land of a very small group that became sort of an elite, even in their own minds, an aristocracy. And in 1950s, 65% of all agricultural land was in the hands of about 4,000 families.
Wow.
That's
a lot of territory.
That's a lot of territory and not many. And agriculture wasn't, it was the only source of wealth originally, which is what, but all these agricultural producers diversified out of agriculture into mining, industry, commerce, etc. So, but they kept their roots as being, in some senses, symbols of their origin. And it became a symbol of who was included and who was not included in the elite. And you could make a lot of money someplace else, but you only got really included when you bought agricultural land. And they tried to even keep people from being able to buy land unless they were part of the... It's a fascinating thing in Chile.
A clique.
A clique. Yeah, but a very big, I mean, a
Yeah,
big clique,
yeah.
but remarkably intermarried. Everybody goes to school together, etc. for many,
You
many
know,
years.
years ago, I was in Santiago with a colleague of mine from campus, and we drove through downtown Santiago.
Yeah.
And there were people on bicycles. It reminded me of downtown San Francisco. It was just the same kind of vibe about the town, and people on bikes and pedestrians, and they're walking their dogs and stuff.
Yeah.
It was really, really fun.
Well, I remember once Larry Vanderhoof went, our then chancellor, went down to Chile for a meeting. I was one of these associated universities of the Pacific or something like that. And while I was there, we went to Valparaiso.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
And on the way back, he said something like, he loved it.
It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, he said, I'll never think of Valparaiso the same again. Chile is a remarkably collegial, enjoyable place. It suffers from class differences. It's really fairly homogeneous, I mean, ethnically. I mean, it's got a large mix of indigenous peoples and European peoples are the ones that sort of have, migrated in. But it's, anyway, so I've been involved with Chile ever since. So when Michelle Bachelet came here to visit Arnold Schwarzenegger in 2008, they renewed a Chile-California program, which existed previously from 65 to 75 and brought many Chileans to California, particularly to UC Davis, to study fruit sciences.
We had in my department probably, well, it was like Little Chile. We had probably 10 students in there at one time.
And they were incredibly important to
Yes.
Chile when they went back, because when Northern Hemisphere demand for Chilean fruit in the summertime, our summer, originated, it was the UC Davis plant science people, the Ph.D.s, that allowed Chile to identify and adopt successfully the technology, and they got most of it from California.
Yeah.
Very, very similar circumstances. I mean, environment, growing environment, and they did it remarkably fast, and they developed essentially the strongest program in the Southern Hemisphere for fruit. And as a result of that development, huge amounts of capital flowed into the agricultural sector, which really developed not just agriculture, but the whole rural sector. Rural towns that had been relatively poor suddenly boomed with all sorts of ag industry to provide inputs, to process outputs, finance, commerce, incomes grew. It's quite remarkable. And that basically is what my book is about. How is it that land reform interacted with these economic reforms, but also with the fruit boom, which is a result of a change in external demand? And I said, if you hadn't had the fruit boom after land reform, unfortunately, all these small farmers would have been very poor, because Chilean agriculture didn't have a comparative advantage. It produced wheat, cattle, etc., but it wasn't highly profitable. And a lot of those people sold to a lot of new entrepreneurs, not the traditional entrepreneurs, not the traditional landholding group. And they were exceptional entrepreneurs. They were they lived on their farms, they adopted technology, they built new techniques of working more efficiently with labor, etc. So that's what I'm trying to explain, and putting it in the context of there. Anyway, that was my second thing. Then I had one with a graduate student. We worked on the international coffee market, which we looked at how the International Coffee Agreement created rents in producing country, which means that there were opportunities for people to grab excess profits. And so there was a lot of profit-seeking that went on in countries, a lot of internal corruption, etc., that resulted. We studied particularly Indonesia and Brazil. I remember talking to somebody in England who was a coffee sailor, and we had done Indonesia all right, and I told him what we had found in Indonesia. He said, let me tell you, whatever you found in Indonesia is child's play compared to what you're going to find in Brazil, and it turned out to be true.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing. And then I had a graduate student who's a dear friend now, who was a vet student, and he came here to get a master's, and he stayed to get a Ph.D. And I became a member of his thesis committee, of his Ph.D. thesis committee, and then he came over and did a master's degree in ARE, and I supervised a master's thesis in Ag Econ.
Mm-hmm.
He's now a professor at the University in vet medicine at the University of Montreal. And we wrote 7 papers together, and that's probably my favorite experience ever with a graduate student. It was sort of a combination eventually of epidemiology and economics. And that was a wonderful experience, and in large part because he was really smart, and we had a great relationship, and it was just fun working with him. Yeah. So yeah, that's...
the university, one of the things they look for in terms of merits and promotions is your roles in university and public service.
Yeah.
And we've covered some of the public service thing, but what have you been doing on campus or other aspects of public service?
I was very interested in the academic senate. I was served on and chaired the committee on public service and the committee on research. And the committee on research, then I got appointed to UCORP, the University Systemwide committee on that. And that ended up, that was just the time when UC had to decide whether to continue management of the National Energy Laboratories, which were Los Alamos, Livermore, and Berkeley, basically the atomic laboratories.
Big question at the time.
It was a very big question. And an absolutely wonderful person, a physicist at San Diego, Henry Barbanel, and I were co-chairs of a committee to make recommendations to the administration, or to the academic council first, which then made a recommendation to the president as to whether we should continue. So we visited all the labs, interviewed people at the labs, interviewed all sorts of faculty on UC, carried out a questionnaire of every member of the UC Systemwide Academic Senate, etc.
They had been fairly free up till then. Did they have a lot of qualms about getting tangled up in the university process?
No, quite the contrary. They desperately wanted the university to continue management because the UC had traditionally protected labs from political manipulation and indulgence. We gave them a lot of prestige because they were UC employees. They participated in our pension plan. Many of them, and a number of them, became faculty at UC or became adjunct faculty in the UC campus. Here at Davis, we had the Department of Applied Science, which were scientists at UC Livermore.
The Crocker Nuclear Lab.
And the Crocker Nuclear Lab. So we got a lot of encouragement from the labs to encourage UC to continue management. And then after that committee ended, there was an academic council committee. It was called the Academic Council on Management of the National Labs, ACSCONAL. And that, I got appointed to that, and we met 5 hours each month for 3 years. A lot of interviews, a lot of discussion, all sorts of stuff. I mean, about the labs, more trips to labs, more interviews with people working in the administration. I remember, what was his name? Holdren, who I think was a chief science advisor maybe to Obama at the time it came. We had an interview with him for 2 hours. I remember my head hurt. one smart cookie. So that was a very memorable experience, and we did ended up continuing management, but joint with Bechtel, and it changed where they were the members of the lab were no longer they were no longer hired by UC, they were hired by the national laboratories separately, which was a real loss, and I think to the labs, and I think to UC, but at least we kept a hand on the oars. So that's good. And then when Bachelet came and restarted this thing, I started a UC Davis Chile partnership program to recruit Chilean graduate students. We had over 50 at one point on campus. There were 50 at Berkeley, there were about 25 at Stanford, and we formed an association of Chilean graduate students on each campus, and then held a seminar, a conference, one-day seminar each year where we brought faculty from Chile and faculty from the UCs and got all the graduate students and their families together.
It's a big conference.
Yeah, to sort of try to create a unity of Chileans from Northern California that would know each other when they went back to Chile.
Yeah.
That was lots of fun. And then the president of Chile appointed a Chile-California Council of Chileans, Americans, and Chilean-American binationals. And there were 17 of us that got appointed in 2011. And I was delighted to be one, and then became chair of that. It was originally a Chilean group run out of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I had no role in this. The others who were the president at the time and others with Chilean government agreement turned it into a non-profit American 501c3 organization, because we thought something that was independent as an organization would be more successful in playing this role of fostering mutually beneficial exchanges between Chile and California. And I became chair in 2013, was chair for almost 8 years. We did a lot of stuff that I thought was really successful and useful. And COVID put sort of a damper on things for a while because nobody could travel. But we're back going. I'm treasurer now. I'm still on the board of directors, although I'm no longer chair. And so that has been really important to me because of the connections to Chile. My 3 children with Maricita, my wife, are all hold dual citizenship, and we go to Chile every year, basically sort of a migration. Sometimes the kids don't make it, but most of the time they do. And that's why the book also is important. It's sort of something. And Arnie Bauer, who was a colleague here in history.
Yeah, that name is familiar.
Arnie, wonderful soul, received the Gabriela Mistral Award, second degree, pretty high up, for his cultural contributions to Chile.
Wow.
He was another Kansas kid, grew up on a farm in northern Kansas while I was in southern Kansas, about 10 years older than me. But I really admire Arnie a great deal and think of him a lot. He wrote on a history of Chilean rural agriculture, Chilean rural society, and a great, really wonderful study. Wrote other stuff. Anyway, so what else? Other things, yeah. It was interesting. At one point, Neil Van Alphen, who was our dean, we went to the dean's office all together. That was an absolutely marvelous moment from my viewpoint. I spent 13 years in the dean's office, 10 as a divisional associate dean, in charge, overseeing sort of 7 very heterogeneous departments. But I was thinking how when we first started, I think there were 7 or so of us deans, and we met twice a week for 2 hours every week, talking about the college and what we wanted to achieve. And Neil was running things, directing things, but everybody was participating. And I found it a very exciting time.
Yeah, he didn't stifle other people.
No,
he
he
wanted
didn't.
to hear.
He was wonderful in that regard. And he was able to also placate us whenever there were sort of turf issues that came up from the 3 different divisions or something like that in a wonderful way. I'll go back. I remember when I was an undergraduate at the University of Kansas, I got appointed. There were 2 members from each class that got appointed to something called the College Intermediary Board, run by the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. And basically we were sort of a student sounding board for issues that came up. And I found academics to be totally alien. It was something, I mean, he gave me a book to read. Somebody had written a book, about it, and I read it, and I thought, this is very different from anything I've ever seen. But I was always interested.
That's the reaction of many people.
Yeah, and so when I had a chance to become involved in academic administration, I was eager and I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed being part of the dean's office. I enjoyed working with you, and particularly Randy and Mike, who were my closest interactions. But it was an opportunity to do things that I'd never had a chance to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that was quite wonderful. And I thought, thinking back, I even made sort of a list of the things that I thought we tried to do in the dean's office. It was, what I remember most is that the College of Ag and Environmental Sciences was clearly the Davis campus originally.
Yeah.
And even when we went into the dean's office, it was something like still 40% or so of the campus. I mean, it was very large.
There's a lot of resentment in the other parts of campus about that.
And that's what I was going to emphasize. So here's a campus that is struggling to become nationally and internationally known. And when I'm coming from Berkeley, I've got 10 minutes. When I was coming from Berkeley, one of the first things I noticed was the campus was white. Well, Berkeley had already become very diverse. And Davis looked primarily at that time at the Central Valley. Mm-hmm. That was its stakeholder group. And somewhat internationally, but the international programs here and social science programs
farm kids
were weak. Yeah, I mean, relatively speaking to the rest of the campus. So, as you said, it was quite understandable that a campus that wants to grow and diversify looks at, where does it get the resources for the other disciplines to grow? You want to grow, if you want more, well, take them away from agriculture, because that's the biggest pot that you've got. And it took some time, and Neil was wonderful. He once described himself, I think, as a junkyard dog.
Protecting.
Yeah, in terms of protecting that, but trying also to persuade the campus, the chancellor, that we should build on strength, not tear down strength, but build on strength. Look for ways in which other departments could interact with faculty in the campus. And what got me, I mean, one, by just talking with everybody, but looking at the academic personnel files that came through, etc., was how strong academically the College of Ag and Environmental Sciences was. I mean, it's funny, Ag Econ was not very respectful of other departments.
I remember that.
It thought it was great. And I thought, Ag Econ was great.
They were.
But didn't mean everybody else wasn't great as well.
Yeah, but they tried to rub that in everybody else's nose.
Well, yeah, and so that was, and the second thing that really struck me was the sense of mission in the College of Ag and Environmental Sciences. I had never seen faculty that were so devoted to doing things of tangible benefit to citizens and a client other than MIT. MIT is that way. MIT is an absolutely fantastic institution that is focused on using technology to better humanity.
Yeah.
And people really, they're brilliant.
That's their focus.
That's the focus. And I was finding that in the College of Ag and Environmental Sciences. I had just wonderful respect and admiration and enjoyment at working with people, you know, across different disciplines and in the dean's office. So that was, I guess the other thing was staff. We had, I think, 1/2 person devoted to fundraising when we arrived, and I think by the time we left, we had 4 or 5.
Yes.
And the whole campus got interested in fundraising, but so did we, and very successful.
That had something to do with some, I don't know if it's like centennial or something of the campus.
I think that's right.
It had some commemorative value to it.
I think that's right. The campus, it was the first time the campus ever had a major, like 7-year fundraising program.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah. And we were part of it. But at the time, I remember we were still had more faculty research grants per year than anybody else on campus, including the medical school. Now, that's no longer true. The medical school has grown, and then that's really, on all campuses, right, that's where the majority of research money comes, or not, I'd say majority, but the largest group for any.
But we were big.
But agriculture really did well in that regard. And I was always proud of that. What else?
What about community involvement? Have you done much in your... You don't live here in Davis, you live down in Berkeley.
Yeah, we never moved because we had a really nice house, and my wife was already settled and sort of working in Berkeley, and also my kids were going to school.
You wanted to keep her your wife, so you didn't make a move.
That's right. So we stayed, and I commuted. And, you know, that's a funny story because the first year we commuted, you know, carpool, but then one of my colleagues said, why don't we rent a 14-passenger van, and it'll be bigger, more economical, easier, etc. So we did. And I then commuted to Davis for 36 years after that, ran the van pool for 15 of those years, because it was really crucial to me. I didn't want it to fail, and it took some effort to keep it going. But it also had the event of meeting tons of people from around the campus. There were lots of people like me with
sit next to him in the van
with a joint, you know, career person, and so they had reason to live in the Bay Area. And one of those persons was Dan Sperling.
Oh, yeah.
And Dan got his Ph.D. in engineering at Berkeley. Dan was the director of Institute for Transportation Studies here. And so he had come over and taken a class from me at Berkeley, in a graduate class in economic development. So, and we had been friendly. We had seen each other from time to time. But we started playing tennis together then. After, you know, get off the van pool, we'd go play tennis in the summertime and then come home. And then he got a divorce and spent a lot of time with Marisita, my wife, and I during that, a very lengthy process. They got remarried, and his wife, Sandy, is a very close friend. So he became one of my very closest friends. That came out of the van pool. So
the director of the Institute for Transportation Studies did the van pool.
He took the van pool. I was very proud of it. That was wonderful. Then after I retired in 2018, I was called back immediately. Sort of worked it out in advance to be the director of the first global center that the campus thought it was going to devise. It was a global center for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we did it, and then COVID came and the budget, you know, crashed. So it never, I think that was the end of the Global Center's ideas, at least for the fund, but did that for a year and a half. And while I was doing that, Alan Bennett, who was the director of the Chile Center, the UC Chile Center, which he had developed, which had major subsidies from the Chilean Development Corporation, left, and so they needed a new director, and said, well, okay, you work on Chile, why don't you do that? I was delighted because it brought me into more contact with Chile. So I did that for almost 2 years. And it was until 2000, summer, July 21, and by that time I was 80 years old, and it wasn't too painful to go into full retirement.
Yeah, at some point you have to fess up to that.
You know, and it's been, I mean, it was a wonderful transition. I mean, I was able to find something to do that I really enjoyed. And now, you know, okay, I'm writing a book, and I've written a couple of articles with Pablo on, you know, this sort of veterinary medicine stuff, and I've got 4 young grandkids that I love spending time with, and my wife and I play pickleball, and we have a large garden, and I garden a lot, and we watch mystery series on TV and sports. Just enjoyed the World Cup enormously. So I look back on it, I said, okay, some more successful in some ways than others, but a very rich experience.
Did you hear about in the World Cup, all these visitors from around the world discovered ranch dressing?
Really?
Oh, gosh.
Ranch dressing was what they loved.
They loved it.
Oh,
that's incredible.
That's really...
That's our contribution to the world society.
That's surprising to me, yeah.
So, as we're getting up to the end here, what words of advice would you give to a new faculty member starting up?
You know, my experience was so different from most. I don't think, I mean, I have colleagues that knew what they wanted to do research on from the day that they were a graduate student and right through their professional career, and they focused and had enormously successful careers as academics. I came in a little naive, sort of interested in lots of things. I've moved about. I've done a lot of stuff that's not academic, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I think I've done some good research, but I don't think that I'm as good a researcher as a lot of other people are. I think you have to sort of find, you have to decide what you really want to do in life.
Find your lane.
And you have to find your lane, and then sort of have the confidence to stick with it. And some of that's just looking for opportunities. And like everybody, I've had successes, I've had failures. You have to get up off the ground sometimes and, go back and take another stab at it.
Keep at it. Okay, well, I guess we're out of time.
I want to thank you very much for agreeing to be my interviewer.
Well, thank you. It was fun.